just an audio test.
The date did change, by the way.
Check 1, 2, 3, 4.
Policy Committee meeting to order, please. And tonight, we're going to certainly set a record in Northern Lehigh and probably the entire state of Pennsylvania. Because tonight, we're going to have a newly elected board member who has never attended officially a public meeting or never attended officially a committee meeting, chair our committee. So with that, Chad, you got it.
Well, and thankfully my job's pretty easy, so I get to pass this responsibility off to Dr. Stoker. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chrisman, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Dr. Stoker, are you able to hear us?
I am.
Excellent. The floor is yours if you would like to walk us through the policies for this evening.
Absolutely. So we have 5 policies to go over this evening. The first one is policy 137.1, which is extracurricular participation by home education students. This policy, we found during the pandemic that Northern Lehigh School District's home education enrollment has jumped from an average of about 30 or 35 students per year to about 50 plus students. Along with this growth, we've received many more inquiries about whether or not home education students can participate in extracurricular activities. So at this point, we thought, that it was a good time to update this policy since the last time it was visited was in 2006. So we used PSBA's recommended changes, and we made those changes to that policy. So the changes that PSBA made last year were done to reflect amendments to Title 10 of the U.S. Code, Section 2031, which was actually based on the National Defense Authorization Act for federal fiscal year 2020, which allowed students to be permitted to join the Junior Reserve Officers Training Course, or the JROTC. So that's why the changes were made, but we've again made those to this policy to include the extracurriculars. So if you look at this policy under the authority section, we did cross out some of this language and really just move some of it around. So essentially this policy states that if a student is a resident of our district in our home education program, that they are allowed to participate in our extracurricular programs. Here's the language under guidelines about the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps. Again, we crossed out some of the language and moved some things around. And it does say that students must be a resident of the school district. The responsibility falls on the building principal or designee, which is typically myself in charge of the home education programs. Work with the students and help them know what activities are available, and then if they want to participate in those, that they have the ability to participate in those. Any questions on that policy?
No questions, Dr. Stoker.
Thank you. Okay, our next policy this evening is the trauma-informed approaches. This is policy 146.1. This is an optional policy for us to have, but as Northern Lehigh School District continues to endeavor to become a trauma-informed district, we believe that this policy is important to have. So in October of 2020, we actually adopted this policy. So this policy is very old. And in June of 2021, PSBA recommended making additional changes based on Act 18 of 2019, which added a new section to school code to establish requirements for school entities related to threat assessment. So you'll see changes in policy 146.1. There's some minor revisions from the original adoption in 2020, but they essentially reflect those additions on the threat assessment. Specifically, language changes, ensuring coordination among teams for implementation of trauma-informed approaches, and that includes the district assessment team, threat assessment team. So as we scroll through the policy, you'll see threat assessment policy and practices that focus on understanding a student's background in order to appropriately address behavior and address the student's needs added. And then further down, you'll see that we talk about several of our programs that we have available and services that we have available to students. And that now includes our threat assessment team in addition to our health services, student assistance program, guidance counseling, those types of approaches that we have. And those are the only changes that we have to the trauma-informed approaches policy. Again, they're to reflect the threat assessment changes in the law. Are there any questions on that?
No questions, Dr. Stoker.
Thank you. Our next policy this evening, following from that, is the actual threat assessment policy. As stated earlier, threat assessment came from the school code changes that happened. So this policy is completely new. It's recommended for legal liability purposes as school entities are required to establish procedures for implementing Title 24, Section 1302 regarding threat assessment. So this was drafted to assist school entities with identifying and addressing the comprehensive compliance elements of threat assessment and contains more procedural language than most PSBA policies do. But again, that's to help guide districts with regard to threat assessment. I will click on this one. This policy defines, includes definitions. You'll see definitions for behavioral services, what biases, individual management plans, threat assessment itself. So you'll see these definitions. Members of the district's threat assessment team were involved in reviewing and revising the policy language to reflect the options and practices that most closely aligned with their specific training and the procedures that were developed for implementing the threat assessment requirements. So you'll see that the body of this policy includes guidelines for training, delegation of responsibility, information for students, guardians, and staff, reporting and identification, inquiry and assessment, response and intervention, and then at the end of the year when we have to do our safe school incident reporting for the year over the summer, that's included. Addressing incidents committed by students with disabilities is part of this, how we will monitor and manage records access and confidentiality, and then inclusion of threat assessment data in the annual report to the board, which is something that we typically do in June, and that's usually done by our school safety and security coordinator. So again, this is a new policy that has come about because of the changes in the law, and it's really just fitting with PSBA's recommendations, and then we customized it to be what our threat assessment team is doing and how they respond to incidences of concern. Any questions on that policy?
No questions, Dr. Stoker.
Thank you. The next one is emergency preparedness and response. This is a policy that we did have. Let me click on it. So this is something that we adopted in 1997. It was last revised in 2020. And this one was really just updated to include school code reference changes. So everywhere that you see these numbers that are in brackets, like for instance this number 1 here, that's all of those school code reference changes that have happened. So those legal citations and policy references in reference to requirements for continuity of instruction in emergency situations. So the policy itself hasn't changed, just those legal references. This policy in particular is recommended for legal liability purposes, as school entities are required to establish procedures for responding to reports, and then also includes the Safe to Say Something program. Any questions on this?
No questions, Dr. Stoker.
Okay, thank you. And then our last one this evening is our school security personnel. This again is a completely new policy. This is policy 805.2. This policy is created to reflect language regarding the school safety and security coordinators' required participation on the threat assessment team. And Officer Nlsd, who does serve in that role, is part of our threat assessment team. He and Mrs. Dowda, our special education director, lead that team. It also includes threat assessment information in the annual school safety and security report to the board, as stated in the other policy. Additional references or revisions were made to the policy to guide to address the background investigation and employment requirements for law enforcement personnel. So Act 57 of 2020 came out, and under those new requirements that went into effect on July 14th of 2021, school entities who employ school police or school security guards who meet the definition of a law enforcement agency, which we are, and must comply then with the requirements for completing a background investigation prior to an offer of employment, as well as conducting a separation record review following offer of a separation record review in accordance with the requirements of the law, regulations, and the procedures of the Pennsylvania Municipal Officers Education and Training Commission, which is MOPAC. So we need to follow essentially some of the same regulations that local municipalities follow with regard to their officers. So that policy was updated to include that language. So you'll see as we scroll through the threat assessment language, you'll see things on background checks here, the requirements being updated in the event that we hire or separate ourselves from a particular officer. And then we need to make reports regarding hiring and separation, and then maintain those records just like a law enforcement agency would need to do in accordance with the law. And that's because the Northern Lehigh School District actually has a Northern Lehigh police, we have police officers, school police officers, and we actually are our own police entity. So we would have to keep those records. Any questions on that policy?
No questions, Dr. Stoker.
Thank you. And again, I just want to remind everybody that these policies are up for first reading on the school board agenda this evening. These are just draft policies, so we're not approving or adopting these policies at this time. If everything hopefully goes as planned this evening and these are passed for first reading, we will look at February for adoption of these policies. So we can always come back to the table if there's any edits or anything that we need to update at the February policy committee meeting. So tonight we would just be looking to move these to the board agenda and look for a first reading to be passed.
Are any
questions or none?
Are any members of the committee opposed to these going to first reading this evening?
I have none.
Okay,
No.
Chad and Bob?
we're good. Okay, Dr. Stoker, we have received approval to move forward with the vote this evening for first reading.
Okay, thank you. That's all we have then for the policy committee meeting agenda this evening.
Very good. Mr. Crispin, I'll look to you to formally close the meeting. Meeting's closed.
Meeting is closed.
Thank you, sir.
Where's my gavel?
Yeah, thanks. So we can't technically begin until 7 o'clock.
No, we can't. So
About
we have
5
like
minutes.
5 minutes till we start. So if you want to take a drink of water, stretch your legs, whatever, and we'll go from there. Okay? See you in 5.
Very good.
Call the meeting to order, please. And if you have an agenda on the top of it, you'll see the civility and decorum statement. I'm not going to read that, but it's all there for your review. All financial matters shall be regarded as roll call votes, and school board meetings shall proceed according to school board policy. At this time, if we could all rise and pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Uh-oh, we don't have a secretary, do we?
I'll do it. Mr. Chrisman?
Here.
Mr. Disler?
Here.
Mr. Fedorcha?
Here.
Ms. Heckman? Ms. Heckman's absent. Mrs. Huzak? Huzak's absent. Mr. Keegan?
Here.
Mr. Kern?
Here.
Mrs. Culp? Mrs. Culp is absent. Mr. Green?
Here.
We have 6 present, 3 not present.
Thank you. Okay, you've all received copies of the minutes of the reorganization meeting December 6th and the regular school board meeting. Is there a motion to approve those? What's that? Oh, I skipped public comment. Anybody have anything they want to say on the agenda?
No one signed up for the
No?
agenda.
So, okay, thank you. Anyway, motion to approve the minutes?
Here.
That was Mr. Disler?
Second.
Mr. Fedorcha, any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and so ordered. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Link, who I assume will turn it to Mr. Geist or someone, and we'll talk to these guys in the front here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to reorganize the agenda just a slight bit, and we're going to recognize our outstanding football team at this time. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Geist to share a proclamation with the audience, the board, and the team.
Thank you, Mr. Link. Football team, I ask you to please rise at this time, all coaches and players. President Green, I ask that this proclamation be entered into the record as so. This proclamation, whereas the 2021-2022 Northern Lehigh High School has completed its football season under the guidance of head coach Joe Tout, assistant coaches Stephen Lushak, Matt Davis, Dylan Huffman, Derek Long, Greg Kashulik, Sean Frame, Matt Newhart, and Justin Smoyer with a record of 11 wins, 4 defeats. And whereas the Northern Lehigh High School football team has captured the District 11 championship for the 2022, and whereas the 2021-2022 Northern Lehigh High School football team has participated in the PIAA playoffs and won 2 state playoff games. And whereas the 2021-22 Northern Lehigh High School football team members, Dylan Smoyer, quarterback, Trevor Amorum, wide receiver, AJ Jimenez, defensive end, Brett Mazzara, defensive back, were named to the PA Sports Writers All-State team. And whereas the 21-22 Northern Lehigh High School football team was recognized by the Pennsylvania Football News as the number 4 ranked team in the state of Pennsylvania in the AA category. And whereas the 21-22 Northern Lehigh High School football team was recognized by Blue Ridge Cable TV 13 as the area's best football team. And whereas the 21-22 Northern Lehigh High School football team was recognized by Eastern PA Football as the number 2 small school in Eastern Pennsylvania. And whereas 21-22 Northern Lehigh High School football coach Joe Tout earned his 100th win. And whereas the 21-22 Northern Lehigh High School football team members Dylan Smoyer set season records in yards passing with 1,755 yards and touchdown passes with 23. Dylan also set career records in yards passing with 2,561 and touchdown passes with 30. And whereas the 21-22 Northern Lehigh High School football team member Trevor Amorum set season receiving yards with 989, career receiving yards with 1,817, and career receptions with 100. And whereas the 21-22 Northern Lehigh High School football team member Matt Frame finished with 47 touchdowns, third all-time, 3,371 career rushing yards, third all-time, and season rush yards, fourth all-time. And whereas the 21-22 Northern Lehigh High School football team's Matt Frame, running back and inside linebacker, Trevor Amorum, athlete and defensive back, Ethan Karpowicz were named to the Colonial League first team. Matt Frame was named Colonial League Defensive Player of the Year. Jaden Krompaski, tackle. AJ Jimenez, defensive end. Nicholas Frame, defensive back. And Brett Mazzara, defensive back, were named to the Colonial League second team. Jackson Van Norman, center. Austin Smith, tight end. And Brett Mazzara, kicker, were named to the Colonial League third team. And whereas the 21-22 Northern Lehigh High School football team has brought distinction, acclaim, recognition, joy, and appreciation to Northern Lehigh School District, and now, therefore, be it resolved that the Northern Lehigh School District Board of Education proclaims its administration and appreciation for the coaches, team members, parents, and all other supporters of the 2021-2022 Northern Lehigh High School football team, signed this 10th day of January 2022.
So many resolved and resolved and resolved in the resolutions and whereases and whatever. You guys did a heck of a job. Congratulations. Coach, do you want to say a few words, or?
No, just I couldn't be more proud of this group. This is something they've worked, this wasn't 1 year. This was a culmination of a very hardworking group that faced a lot of different circumstances and worked through it. And, you know, as coaches, we're proud of them. And as far as the community, with all the different things going on, we really felt the community embraced us as well as the school district, and we'd like to thank you for having us here this evening.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it, guys. Thanks for everything you do.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Job.
I think Mr. Geis is going to ask you to join for a group picture in the auditorium, because I'm already getting media requests for a group picture. Congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Geis.
Any of the girls here that?
We're going to have Mr. Velasquez. Okay, and next we're going to have our high school principal, Mr. Velasquez, come up to recognize some of our amazing high school students who accomplished something quite remarkable on their Act 35 Civic Knowledge exam. Mr. Velasquez, I'll turn it over to you for further acknowledgement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lang. Good evening, members of the board, members of our community. One of our graduation requirements at Northern Lehigh High School is to take civics and take the assessment of civic knowledge. Today, I am proud to present to you 8 of these amazing students, last year's juniors, this year's seniors, who earned a perfect score on this assessment. These students were invited to be honored tonight and receive certificates highlighting this accomplishment. I will read each name, and as I do, I would like each student to come up and receive their certificate. Now, Mr. Link, members of the board, I did invite the students, but I know that there were prior commitments. So nonetheless, I would still like to read each of their names because I believe they deserve this recognition. Our first student is Gabriel Ardemovic. I know Gabe has been absent last week, so. Damian Brad. Brooke Delancey. And I know she's working in Duncan right now. She'll probably be here a little bit later, so I'll make sure to give this to her then. Brianna Hess. Alicia Quattrocki. I know she's one of our cheerleaders, so. Skylar Schellenberg. Robert Schramel. I thought I saw him back there. Congratulations, sir.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
And last but not least, Mason Walsh. I know we only have Robert here, but how about a nice round of applause for his outstanding student. Additionally, Mr. Link, I will get a picture with all of them to put on our Twitter account recognizing this achievement with their certificates.
Thank you, Mr. Lassie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations to all those students that scored perfect on their civics exam. And now we'll return to the traditional order of the meeting.
Okay, yeah, we're going to go back to special board reports. Gail is not here, so we have no report there. Lehigh Career, Mr. Fedorcha.
Thank you. I did attend the last meeting. Of course, we were not seated because of the election, but I have 3 retirements that are really going to be hurting to the Votech School. We're losing our business manager. She is retiring this year. We're right now looking for one. I've been notified that our director, Dr. Rushton, is also going to be retiring because of health reasons, and his secretary is also going to be retiring. So we're going to be looking for a lot of top people, and I know that the number of people out there that are eligible and qualified are very low, so it's going to be an interesting time. We did not elect a president because the president who is going to be the new president also was not seated, so we're going to be electing him this month. We did elect the vice president, which is Paul Champagne from East Penn. And basically, we're running pretty well to schedule to all the schools. If there's a snow day, we also do it virtually. Right now, we are also in very low numbers of COVID, and I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Fedorcha, your term is ongoing. You don't need to be reelected at this
That-
point?
That's until I resign, yes.
Oh, okay.
So you're stuck with me.
That long, yeah.
And thank you, I really appreciate that, Barbara.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we didn't drop that, Gary. So.
No.
Michelle is not here, so we have no legislative report. The only thing I would say quickly about the community colleges, we approved our budget on Thursday night. The budget is up a little bit. Northern Lehigh share is down a little over $1,000. I'm not sure off the top of my head exactly how much. That will probably be on our agenda next month for approval. And that's about all I have. Committee reports. We did have the policy committee meeting this evening at 6:30. So if any of you walked in and wondered what was happening, that was the conclusion of the policy meeting that we had this evening because it was canceled last week. And the remainder of the committee meetings were not held in January, so there's no other committee reports available. Student rep, not representatives, representative tonight.
Good
So.
evening, everyone. Tonight, Danielle has a game. So I also have a very short report. So Coffee and Convo will be on Thursday, January 13th, 6 p.m. in the library. Keystones are being held currently, I know tomorrow, and then Wednesday and Thursday. Tomorrow is mathematics, and then literature is the following 2 days. And then final exams are coming up, January 20th and 21st. And then I have the scores for winter sports. Girls basketball, league record is 2-4, overall record 3-4. Boys basketball, league record is 1-4, overall 2-8. Wrestling, league record is 0-3, overall record is 2-8. I also know that the boys are playing tonight at home, so good luck to them, and the girls are away. And lastly, I would just like to say a special happy birthday to Danielle, because today is a very special birthday, so I just want to say that. And that is all I have for tonight, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
No report, thank you.
Solicitor's report? Okay. Business manager, Mrs. Smallsworth. I think you're next.
Can we maybe pause for 1 second? I think we have another recipient for the perfect score on
okay,
the
sure.
civics exam. Mr. Velasity, back to you.
Sorry about that.
And just to acknowledge her punctuality, Ms. Brooke Delancey, will you please come forward to get your certificate? She did say that she was working and she would be here a little bit later.
My shift ended at 7.
she is a winner of the Dwight D. Eisenhower Leadership Award last year as one of our outstanding juniors that I had posted on Twitter earlier this year. So she might look familiar to you.
Yeah.
Her name is on the plaque right outside the auditorium. So, and Brooke's always around, and she's also one of our Northern Lehigh scholars. So I can't say enough about her. So maybe another time I'll tell you more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lastini. And congratulations, Brooke. Thanks for making it this evening. Business manager?
Okay, now we're ready for the business manager. Sorry about that.
No, thank you, Mr. Green. Distributed tonight at your board seats was your single audit report. That will be on next month's board agenda for approval. Just drawing a little bit of highlight to that, there are 3 areas where there could be concerns for the budget, either control deficiencies, significant deficiency, or material deficiency. Material deficiency being the worst of them all. I am happy to report that this report is actually absolutely no findings. There was no control deficiency, no significant or no material deficiency. I'm very proud of my staff for what they did this past year, and I would commend them for a perfect audit on our account. The next thing that is on the board agenda is post-issuance compliance. So every year we must report on the EMA website, which is the Municipal Securities Ruling Board, because the district has bonds. Every December 28th, I have to post out on that website our current budget, our current AFR, and other information about the district. So it will be enrollment, our revenue that we received from taxes, our millage rate, our 10 highest taxpayers in our community. And then I have to report to the board that that has been completed. That was done before our Christmas holiday break, so we are in compliance with our rulemaking board and filing that information. Next thing on the agenda is Act 1 resolution. The Act 1 resolution is on the agenda for approval this evening. We have to do one of 2 things. We either have to adopt a preliminary budget by January 31st of every year, or we must pass a resolution stating that we will not raise our taxes over the index. Northern Lehigh's index this year is 4.6%, and we are making a resolution not to raise our taxes over the adjusted index this year. And then the last thing I have that I distributed at your seats was what President Green already talked about. The Tri-C budget is on there. It is $1,154, a decrease. And the CLIU budget, which is a $286 increase. Both of those will be on the agenda next month for approval. They're for you to review this month. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. And that's all from the business office.
Thank you. And I just want to say, your first item on there, the single audit, help me if I'm wrong, but this is what, about the 92nd year in a row that you haven't had any issues? All right, it's been a couple anyway.
Yes.
And congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
I think you've done an excellent job. Thank you to you and your staff.
Thank you.
Assistant Superintendent
And
is,
this evening, Dr. Stoker will be giving her report remotely, so I'll turn it over to our technology department to queue her up.
Thank you very much. January is School Board Appreciation Month. On behalf of the stakeholders in the Northern Lehigh School District, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our board members for their dedication to our district. We recognize and appreciate the time and effort you put into the governance of our school district every day. We also acknowledge that we are living through unique times in education and appreciate your continued leadership and support in navigating the pandemic. As a token of our appreciation, at each of the board members' places this evening is a library book being donated on your behalf to one of the school libraries. There is also a message of gratitude from our librarians and a sweet treat candy bar for you to enjoy. Secondary level librarian Ms. Tiedman couldn't be with us this evening, but asked me to share the following sentiment with you. Thank you to the board and administration for your continued support of the district libraries. Our district-wide library program remains active and impactful, simultaneously adapting to meet the needs of our students and staff while remaining consistent in our services to our school community. Your contributions and encouragement allow us to continue providing materials and resources to support our Bulldogs in all aspects of life as they pursue personal success. You are appreciated. So again, on behalf of all of the Northern Lehigh School District stakeholders, thank you to each and every one of our school board members for all you do. Next, I would like to provide a state testing update. District-wide, we have started to administer the access for ELS or WIDA assessments in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. These assessments, which are given to our English learners, are designated to measure students' proficiency in the English language. The testing window is January 6th to February 18th, which seems like a large window. However, we do have a significant amount of exams to administer during that time. Mrs. Madiola, our English Language Development Program teacher, will be administering all of the assessments, which is very close to 100, to our nearly 30 students during that time, while Mrs. Beller, our ELDP paraprofessional, will continue to work with the students on their daily skills. It will be a tight squeeze getting all of the assessments in, but we have a plan for accomplishing it under those time constraints, and so far our program team is doing a really great job with that. Last week, as our student representative said, we started the Keystone exams at the high school. On Thursday, we started with Algebra 1. Then we had 2 weather days that bumped our schedule a little bit. But we will resume tomorrow with the remainder of the Algebra 1 assessment, followed by literature on Wednesday and Thursday, and then Friday is the last day of winter Keystones, and that will be used for makeups. There are 99 students scheduled to take the algebra assessment and scheduled to take literature. So there will be a lot of testing going on at the high school this weekend as well. Lastly, I will be reporting on the Esser updates. The board members at your places should have paper handouts of our Esser grants. They were also forwarded via email as well. Each month we do provide an update on spending with regard to our Esser grants. For the public, these will be presented this evening and then posted to my Nlsd webpage tomorrow. So if you would like to view them in more detail at that time, you can. The Esser presentation for this evening reflects spending as of the end of 2021, so it includes everything up through December 31st. If we turn past the introductory slide to the second slide in the pack, you will see an update of spending on our Esser 1, 2, and 3 grants. Our allocation for Esser 1 was of our second Esser grant is $1,458,000. We have spent $280,361 of those funds to date. Our district renovation in the middle school at a cost of $655,490, which is reflected as an encumbered cost for Esser 2, leaving $522,974 that we have left to spend, and we have a spending list for that amount that includes the salary and benefits of our technology integration specialist for 3 years. On that slide as well is our Esser 3 allocation, which is approximately $2.95 million, of which $590,156 must be used to address learning loss. To date, we have spent nearly $950,000 of that grant, leaving a subtotal of approximately $2 million. Expenses since last reported include smart music for Slatington Elementary, and the salary and benefits of some of our added staff, like our department leaders, our Director of Educational Technology, Curriculum Instruction, LPN that we have at Peters, the paraprofessional that I referenced earlier in our English Language Development Program, cafeteria monitors, and some additional paraprofessionals to help with our MTSS program. I would like to note that you may see some discrepancies between spending on this slide and the previous slide that has happened in past months, and that's due to our Federal Programs Division of Pennsylvania Department of Education returning our grant applications to us to make Esser 2 and 3 more of a 50-50 balance between instructional and non-instructional expenditures. This was not a stipulation in the original grant guidance, but something that they are now strongly recommending. So we did have to go back and essentially just take some of those purchases and move them between the Esser 2 and Esser 3 grants. So thank you very much to our business office for spending a lot of time moving those things around. If we now transition to slide 3, you will see some categories of spending for Esser 3B grant. This is our new addition because we just submitted this grant recently. You'll see our allocation for social emotional learning for students is about $50,000, of which we have spent about $9,000 on the PASS Universal Screener. This is a tool that we are giving to all of our students K-12 to help identify any barriers to education that they may have that are social, emotional, or mental health related. We also spent about $3,300 on a social worker, and that brings that cost to $12,440 that we've spent in that area. Our allocation for social, emotional, and mental health for staff is $16,382. We do not have any expenditures yet out of those funds. For reading, our allocation is $13,105. We've spent $4,170 on the Scholastic Rise program, about $863 on Nifty 50, and $80 on Haggerty Phonemic Awareness videos for a total of about $5,000 in that area. Most of those purchases were, again, for reading and work for Peters Elementary School. Under learning loss, we had an allocation of $85,184, of which we spent about $2,500, and that was for Zern, which accompanies our Eureka math program in Slatington. We'll be making the purchase as well for Peters in that area. That will be reflected probably next month. In total on this slide, we've spent $20,051 of the $183,816 that's allocated for those pieces of Esser 3B. If you turn to the last slide, those are the remaining categories of Esser 3B, which are after-school programs and also summer school or summer enrichment. For our after-school programs, we have allocated $32,763. To date, we've spent almost $10,000 on the USA Test Prep assessment tool. We are currently in the process of kicking off our after-school programs in our schools to support students. Currently, our principals are assessing which staff members we have to serve in the capacity of tutors or being able to give homework help or help students with different skills. And then we also are looking at which students would be interested or families would like their students to participate in those programs. So we're looking to potentially kick those off at the end of January, beginning of February, and they'll run for multiple years. Lastly, we have $32,763 allocated for summer enrichment. Obviously, we have not spent anything in that area yet because we have not gone through the summer, but we are in talks with our elementary summer STEAM camp leaders, Mr. Weber and Mrs. Hood, and we're looking to expand that program up into our middle school beginning this summer and then potentially carrying out further. So our administrative team and our principal, Mr. Hauser, are working with that group. More to come on that in future meetings. Any questions on the Esser slides or spending in those areas?
Any questions for anything at all from Dr. Stoker? Anyone? No? Thank you, Dr. Stoker, for your report. We appreciate it. Next, we go to Superintendent, Mr. Link.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Dr. Stoker. I would like to echo Dr. Stoker's comments and recognition of our school board as well for School Board Recognition Month. I enjoy working with you. I enjoy the support that you give me and the administrative team and the teachers and all of our support staff. There's a lot of experience up here on this table for school board directors. And I would also like to officially welcome Mr. Chrisman, our newest school board member, attending his first board meeting this evening. He has been working actively to go through the school board the required school board training modules, and he may be the fastest school board member to have completed them since I've worked here. So I thank you for your dedication to that, and welcome aboard.
Thank you, appreciate it.
We've already did the recognitions of our football team and our Act 35 Civic Knowledge Perfect Score recipients. So at this time, we're going to transition into our school district anti-bullying presentation. I will kind of set the stage for this from up front here, and then our building principals will be kind of walking you through different sections of this presentation this evening from the podium so they can better address the board. We're going to ask that any questions be held until the end, and then we'll open it up for questions from the school board. And then if, Mr. Green, if you would like questions from the audience outside of public comment. So that being said, we'd like to kind of start with a definition. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Start with a definition of what is bullying. School board members, if it's easier for you to sit out in the audience to see this, please do so. So what is bullying? When we talk about bullying, we define it a certain way, and that is bullying means an intentional, electronic, written, verbal, or physical act or series of acts directed at another student or students, which occurs in a school setting and or outside of a school setting, utilizing a school network, a school device, or at like a off-site trip, something like that, that is severe, persistent, and pervasive, and has the effect of doing any of the following: substantially interfering with the student's education, creating a threatening environment, or substantially disrupting the orderly operation of the school. So that is the definition that we work in here when we're investigating misbehavior or bullying or both. Next slide, please. So what governs or addresses bullying in our district? So extending it past that definition, we look to policy number 249, which is bullying and cyberbullying. This policy is available on our district website under the policy section. We also consider the Nlsd bullying prevention plan, also posted on each school's website and available for your review at any time. And then finally, we reference our student handbooks, especially when we're looking at progressive discipline guidelines, which help administrators and staff kind of go through a continuum of interventions, anywhere from proactive interventions to disciplinary consequences for students. So that's kind of the backdrop of what we're referencing when we talk about bullying in Northern Lehigh School District. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our elementary principals, first being Mr. Schneiderite, to give some further information and then to speak specifically about Peters Elementary School.
Thank you, Mr. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Mr. Briner and I will be presenting information for both of our buildings because, as many of you know, we share a K-6 handbook, and we work very closely on all matters K-6 elementary, even though we're in two different buildings. And I'd like to first start by saying that although if you review our handbook, there's nothing in there that necessarily says our anti-bullying program, our school-wide positive behavior and support program is an anti-bullying program. The difference between the two, in a traditional anti-bullying program, the focus is on what not to do. Whereas our school-wide positive behavior support program, and from now on I'll call it the Schweppes program, as will all the rest of the principals, we teach students what we expect them to do. So it's basically going about behavior in a different way. I'll begin by giving an overview of our Schweppes framework and how it's applied at the elementary schools. This framework will be highlighted in our handbook as well as throughout this evening's presentations because Mr. Briner, Mr. Hauser, and Mr. Velocity will be using the same concepts as they speak. We, K through 12, use this framework to address behaviors. So the first thing regarding our Schweppes program is, and the first thing we do to address behaviors is we teach all students the expectations. This is our Tier 1 approach to addressing behavior. Typically in classrooms, teachers set their expectations, set their classroom rules. But the Schweppes program goes way further. Students are not always in classrooms. So we also focus on what happens outside of the classroom in areas such as cafeterias, buses, playground, the hallways, and in the bathrooms. We focus on our core principles, and at the elementary school, students at Peters and Slatington are expected to be responsible, respectful, safe, and proud. I bet you many parents have heard that many times. If I go into any room in Peters Elementary School and say, boys and girls, we expect you to be, they would all, without a hesitation, be able to repeat those back. We teach those core principles, and in a moment I'll show you how we actually use those to impact behavior. In our Schweppes framework, once we teach those expectations, we reward students who exhibit good behavior. At Peters, we have Peters Paws. At Slatington, they have Bulldog Bucks. And any staff member, bus driver, has the ability to reward students for great behavior, hopefully promoting good behavior in that student, as well as inspiring others to better their behavior so that they can earn their paws and their bucks. I'll tell you every day as I'm waiting to take the students out onto the buses, they love to show me how many paws they earned that day. I've got 5 paws, Mr. Schneider, right? I've got 3 paws today. It's a source of pride for them. Students can use this currency to purchase things in our school store or purchase experiences within our school store. We also look at other ways to reward students. Perhaps there might be a behavior we're targeting for improvement, and we might build in a class-wide or a grade-wide reward. Or, at Peters Elementary School, we have monthly rewards, which I'll give more details about in a moment. So what about when a student does not follow those expectations? When students are still exhibiting challenging behaviors, we go to our Tier 2 or Tier 3 approaches to address those through intervention. We provide those students support to address those behaviors, and I'll give some more details about that in a little while. These interventions can either address groups of behaviors or individual behaviors in a more intensive manner. So to summarize, we teach behavior, we reward good behavior, and we provide support for students who are challenged with learning that behavior the first time in order to help them improve. Next slide, please, Mr. Hollis. To me, the best thing about our Schweppes framework is that it's a proactive approach to managing behaviors. To give you an example, responsible, respectful, safe, and proud, it's basically 4 words. Sure, students can say those, but we go way beyond that. We go about what that means. So to teach those, we explicitly teach what it means for, and the teachers do this, for those principles within our school. What does it mean to be responsible in the cafeteria? What does it mean to be safe on the buses? At the beginning of the school year, we actually have a bus sitting outside for 2 days and take every student in the building outside to the buses, and the teachers teach them what it looks like. We take them into to the cafeterias beforehand and teach them what responsible, respectful, safe, and proud look like. There were a couple members of the board who were at our playground initiation when we opened it up, and one of the things we do is we teach them explicitly what responsible, respectful, safe, and proud looks like on the equipment. And we use that as the framework for teaching appropriate behavior. Throughout the year, we provide opportunities for reteaching, and if a student, again, does not quite meet those expectations, we have interventions, and one of them I'll highlight because it's impactful in all of our buildings, is the check-in, check-out program. Students that are in this program meet every morning with a mentor, oftentimes a teacher or a staff member, and they basically start that student's day off in a positive manner. The student has what's called a check-in, check-out form or sheet that goes with them so that a teacher or the group of teachers can evaluate the students throughout the day. That helps us because maybe we'll be able to see patterns. We'll see that every single day Johnny does great until lunch. Okay, well, 7 days in a row, lunch has become an issue. Then we can identify, well, what's the issue in lunch? It also helps to serve with communication because at the end of the day, that student in this program meets with their mentor at the end of the day. They review their day, they give kudos and try to reteach things. And that form goes home to communicate with parents so that they're aware and a partner in this improvement of the behaviors. So this is the framework we use at all buildings. We teach, reteach, reward, and provide intervention through programs and other initiatives at different buildings to address those behaviors. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Briner, who will take us through our response at the elementary schools to bullying.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. So I'm going to be talking about the response, or how we respond when we get a report of bullying. We recognize that every day conflict happens, whether it's in the classroom, it might happen at home, it might happen in the community, in the workplace. And we define conflict as a disagreement or an argument in which both sides express their views, and there is relatively equal power between the two. So when a report of bullying comes in, or a referral for bullying, we have to decide, okay, is this bullying or is this conflict? Sometimes while this is occurring, there's a perception that nothing's being done because there's not a necessarily immediate action that might be seen or a consequence that occurs for what's being alleged. But I can tell you that Mr. Schneider-Wright and myself handle these incidents very similarly, and we deal with it all the time. We deal with kids having conflict. There's always going to be either an outcome and or a consequence when we are dealing with these situations. However, not all of that information can always be shared with the families because of confidentiality. So every incident that is referred or reported, we investigate. And reports of inappropriate behavior occur from students, we get them from families, we get them from community members. We actually have community members that call and report things. Sometimes this is direct, sometimes this is anonymous. But discipline referrals typically happen in two levels. A level one, which is handled inside the classroom by the teacher. And in that scenario, the teacher typically issues the consequence. Or a level two, that's handled by the principal, and we work through our progressive discipline policy outlined in our handbook. So consequences include, with that progressive protocol, that would include warnings or conferences with students or families, detentions, suspensions, and in extreme situations, police referrals if necessary. So in the investigation, we talk to many people with the goal of confirming the story and also getting the context around the story. Then we make a decision on an appropriate intervention or action based on what we're able to find. In all cases, our goal is to get to the root cause of what's happening with the issue. We want to determine the cause of the behavior. We want to work with the student or students to try to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And we try to restore any type of a relationship through conflict resolution or mediation. So we approach this with the mindset of resolving the issue by doing things with the students rather than to them. Consequences include direct discipline, but that's not the only intervention, as Mr. Schneider-Wright shared, that's implemented. The goal is always to change the behavior. We can't punish discipline we can't punish or discipline the behavior away. We have to work with students and teach them replacement behaviors which sometimes that takes time. And again, the ultimate goal is to change the behavior. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to talk about kind of what we're seeing. Okay, so we've seen this year an overall increase in behavioral referrals, both level 1 and level 2. Specifically at Slanington, we've seen about 3 times the average compared to the average of the 3 years prior to the pandemic happening. Most challenging areas, they haven't changed. It's still the classroom, it's still buses, it's still the cafeteria, it's still recess. We have done professional development for our staff regarding strategies and on expectation, classroom management, punishment versus reinforcement, and instructional engagement. In our core time and our win time, we're focusing on our learning gaps and academic recovery so that we can decrease the avoidance behaviors that we might see. We've also implemented the PASS survey, which has given us data on school connectedness, self-efficacy, and motivation with our students. And we continue to teach our expectations and booster them all the time. On our buses, we've actually started implementing our token economy. As Mr. Schneider-Wright said, we've had principals ride buses before. This year, in our cafeteria, we've implemented volume, because volume is always one of the biggest issues in the cafeteria, or volume meters to help students reference. And explicitly at recess, we've had to teach kids how to play. They're missing the social skill around that. So we're trying to continue to understand the contextual and social challenges that we're facing. The pandemic has brought a lot. We've seen behaviors and absence of social skills that may have been there in the past. We've had students that were virtual since March of 2020. We've had students that have attended in person, have social distance, have masked, have quarantined. We have students and adults that have experienced trauma, have lost a family member, have maybe dealt with financial frustrations at home, many different things. Our current societal norms, our climate, our atmosphere right now has changed, and our kids are witnessing that and dealing with that as well. And I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of variables that go into this and a lot of factors around this. Some of them have been around forever, some of them are new, and some of them have been exacerbated because of the current situation. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Schneider-Wright to talk a little more about Peters specifically.
So we're very proud at Peters. We've been awarded Tier 1 fidelity and continued fidelity of our Schweppes program. So for years now, we've utilized this framework. We meet on a monthly basis and continue to examine data, provide support, and plan for the future. This year, we will also be evaluated, and we hope to earn Tier 2 fidelity, which is going to directly address our use of the check-in, check-out program. Now, we have a number of things outside of the framework that we've spoken about that we have at Peters to address behavior. First and foremost, Mrs. Cromer, our school counselor, meets with students every day on an individualized basis. She talks with families all the time and does an outstanding job being a great liaison between parents and students. Mrs. Cromer and I are currently working to bring one of our district partners, the Center for Humanistic Change, in to provide lessons on social emotional learning via a program called the Second Step program. Within this program, there are 4 units: growth mindset and goal setting, emotion management, empathy and kindness, and problem solving. We're hoping that this program will provide students with the sort of the education they need to appropriately manage their own behaviors as they grow older. Next slide, please. Finally, we continue to provide opportunities for students at Peters to celebrate the positivity that goes on within our school. Some of these events might include the Principal's 100 Board. This is an initiative that gives teachers an extra opportunity to highlight exceptional behavior by their students. Acts of Kindness, which is an event where students create messages and pictures to send to local nursing homes. Chalk Our Walk, which is an event where students write positive and supportive messages on our sidewalks to celebrate their positive behavior. And at the end of the year, we hold the Spring Fling to celebrate positive behavior. It's held outdoors, and students engage in fun, collaborative activities. Folks, I'm very proud of our Schweppes program at Peters. I believe this is a framework that works because it focuses on the positivity within students. It teaches expectations instead of just trying to punish behaviors to change them. And it uses a partnership between students, parents, staff to benefit that student. And just to give you one example from Peters, that's, we go through this every day. I could have picked 100 things. But one specific example, just to give you an idea of how this framework works at Peters. Early in the year, I saw bus referrals coming in, And there was one bus where it was obvious that this bus was a bigger challenge than others. I spoke to the bus driver. She noted that the students were loud, were unsafe, and were disrespectful on the bus, to people on the bus and to people outside of the bus. As Mr. Briner said, principals ride buses. I've rode buses many, many times over the past few years. I rode the bus home a few times over the span of a week, and I can confirm to you, these behaviors were all occurring. Instead of, because we could have taken the approach of teaching them what not to do and then, disciplining them, suspending them off of the bus in hopes that that would address the issue. Instead, we used our Schweppes framework, right? We tried to educate them. For about a month, Mrs. Cromer or I went onto that bus every single day to teach them our expectations. We made it focused and simple. Remain in your seat with your behinds in the seats. Sometimes the kids remain in their seat, but they're on their knees, turned around and leaning across the hallways or the aisles. Keep your hands to yourself and be kind to each other. Simple principles that if we all lived those every day, it'd be a pretty good life. Every time I received a good report about a student, compliments, high fives, fist bumps, promoting great behavior. I still worked with students individually. I actually ended up communicating with every single parent on that bus, asking them to work with us to help set that standard for their own child at home. It took some time, and over time, it improved. And I'm very happy to say that in the last month, I have not received one referral from that bus. I still go on that bus every day. There are still students we have to discuss things with and talk to. There's still students that are on bus improvement plans that we work directly to provide that intervention. But this framework works because, again, it's proactive and we're able to address the issues through education. So thus ends my report. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Briner to talk about Slatington Elementary School. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Schneiderwright. I would like to echo everything that he just said about the Schweppes program. Very proud of it at Slatington. We work very hard in many different facets to teach our students the positive behaviors and expectations. We too are working with CLIU 21 and our Schweppes coordinator to evaluate our program. And we have been recognized for Tier 1 fidelity, and we are in the process of being evaluated for Tier 2. In addition to our Schweppes program, or related to it, should I say, we've also implemented zones of regulation. So zones of regulation, for those of you that aren't aware of what that is it's a framework and a curriculum that teaches students how to scaffold skills toward developing a metacognitive pathway to build awareness of how they're feeling, and gives them strategies in terms of regulation, pro-social skills, self-care, and overall wellness. It's given us a systematic approach to teaching kids how to regulate their emotions, or at least recognize their emotions. And with zones of regulation, we check in with our kids daily, every day, in the morning, as soon as they first come in. And we've been able to intervene in a lot of different issues that kids may be having based on these check-ins. Students telling us that they're in the red, so that when we get that kind of feedback immediately, our teachers can intervene and provide support. So it's a great program system framework that we've also implemented this year. We are also teaching mindfulness lessons, trying to teach our students how to be mindful, really focusing on the positives, focusing on themselves, focusing on their wellness, and not being mindful, okay, and really thinking about the negative and everything that's going on in their lives. So we continue to do those. We continue to implement anti-bullying or bullying lessons and education also in classes. Next slide, please. We continue to facilitate quarterly rewards and have discussions on our expectations. We are currently setting up what we're calling the Schweppes Booster, where I'll be going into every single classroom and having individual classroom discussions, sometimes more focused in one direction than another based on what we know from that specific classroom around our expectations. Prior to the winter break, we had lessons presented to us by the Lehigh Valley Health Network Weller Education Center specifically on anti-bullying. We had one day where they came in and did 3rd and 4th, and one day they came in and did 5th and 6th. We are going to continue to partner with them as they come in and present other topics for us as well. And we are continuing to find additional activities to address the behaviors that we are seeing at Slatington as well. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our middle school, Mr. Hauser, to talk a little bit about the middle school.
Thank you, Mr. Briner, Mr. Schneiderite. Good evening, everyone. Members of the board, administration, community members, good to see everybody. Thank you for the time this evening. Next slide, please, Mr. Haas. I want to start off just by, first of all, thank you to Mr. Schneiderite and Mr. Briner for explaining what the school-wide positive behavior support program is. We also have similar programs at the secondary level, both myself and Mr. Velocity at the high school. We just run things in a manner that might be a little bit more age appropriate to give the best description of that. So you will see some differences between how it's implemented. That's just natural for moving from elementary school to the secondary level. I'll start off by looking at our handbook. Our handbook at the middle school does have very clear, very plain-spoken definitions of what bullying is, and also harassment, and also that keyword conflict, to delineate the differences between all of those. And students are educated as far as where certain scenarios might stand through examples that are written directly into our handbook. That language comes from our policy and also from Pennsylvania statute, but again, written in a way that is very plain spoken for a middle school reader. Revised for this school year were our positive behavior support program, including descriptions of what we call the essential skills we want all kids to exhibit on a daily basis. And also, we introduced a formalized levels of disciplinary infractions, moving from 1 through level 4, and then also progressive discipline guidelines to expand the language to make sure that the proper infraction has the proper response. And I'm going to use the word response, not necessarily punishment, because it's also addressing student needs, as Mr. Briner and Mr. Schneiderite talked about. Next slide, please. So this graphic up here, you will see if you walk through the middle school or through the high school, you will see posters like this identifying what elements are inside of our positive behavior support program. So we don't have school rules the way they're traditionally presented. We have essential skills: goal setting, networking, teamwork, agility, perseverance, and leadership. And within those essential skills, we will address bullying as part of our behavior matrix. For example, when we do lessons on agility, or we refer to a particular conflict between students, we reference agility, one of the things we try to teach students is the phrase agree to disagree. Valuable skill that we all can have. We try to make that, again, plain spoken and in a way that a student can understand, while reinforcing the skill they can take with them outside of school and beyond whatever grade they are presently in. Now, that's not the only way we will address conflicts, bullying, or other situations, as you'll see. Next slide, please, Mr. Haas. We are trying to be much more proactive this year at the middle school. So, for example, at the beginning of this year, we had a lot of students coming through my office and Mr. Stroll's office that had repeat infractions at level 1 and level 2. And we kind of felt we kept just spinning our wheels. We're giving detention, we're doing loss of privilege, we're doing all those things, but we're not getting anywhere. So what else can we do? So moving into the second quarter, we worked with our Tier 2 PBIS coordinator, that is Mr. Jason Reinhardt, who's also one of our health and phys ed teachers at the middle school and certified in positive behavior support. And he and I developed an enhanced check-in, check-out. I'll use the word class, but it's not like a graded class or anything on a schedule. But it's a group of students that will get together voluntarily in a small group setting weekly, and they will work on whatever needs they have that might be considered social interactions or behaviors. So an example that we have running presently everything from working on academics and how to manage your academics and keep ahead on things like that, to how to handle middle school drama and conflicts, and attendance is in there, or just any repeated low-level infractions. We've had great success with this. As of the end of December, we saw a 40% reduction in referrals, specifically conflicts, bullying, and peer interaction related. I'm also including like language and foul language, things like that. But a 40% drop in a matter of 7 to 8 weeks. So that program really, really did well. We have about 40 students participating in that program presently. We're looking to kind of revolve that in the next quarter and do that again. So I'm very proud of that. This works in tandem with the Center for Humanistic Change, the CHC, as they also do small group setting in the middle school for conflict, social skills, and we also added being a new student. We hadn't run that group before at the middle school level, so just being a new student and transitioning to a new building, we've worked with that. Next slide, please, Mr. Haas. So, responses to reports of bullying, one of the things that we've had great success with at the middle school, when something actually rises to the level of bullying or we feel it's going to get there, we will offer students a bullying mediation or a conflict resolution. Those meetings are facilitated by either myself or Mr. Stroll and the school counselor, or also Mr. Reinhardt as our positive behavior support coordinator. Those can be one-on-one, they can be small groups, it's voluntary, and in these sessions there are very strict ground rules. In a nutshell, those ground rules are, everyone in the room will speak, everyone in the room will listen, everyone in the room will respond. So we're teaching students there that if there is this conflict, you're going to hear what the other person has to say, you're going to sit there, listen to everything, you're going to tell your side of things, and then respond to one another. And what we're finding is, as everything comes to the table, students do a really nice job of working through those conflicts and those issues. And they don't all become friends at the end. Sometimes they find a mutual understanding of, we need to keep distant. And then what we do as administrators or with our school counselor is work with them to set guidelines as to what happens if this agreement cannot be upheld. That can be disciplinary, that can be other interventions along the way. But students know, and we've had a very good success rate with this. Next slide, please, Mr. Haas. This is an outline of what is called progressive discipline. There are situations that might arise where you might skip a few steps here. For example, if Lord forbid something becomes physical in the building, we're very likely going to move toward number 3 there at the suspension level. If a punch is thrown, things of that nature, it warrants a higher infraction. But usually we'll work through this because along the way we're teaching students not just consequence and accountability, but we're implementing those mediations, we're implementing those conflict resolutions along the way. So you'll see things in here, warning if it's something very minor, loss of privilege, detention, suspension. If we need to, we will use the athletic honor code if our student athletes are involved. And if we do need to, we will also go to the school police or our Title IX officer if we feel something is discriminatory in nature. Next slide, please. Here's some of the things that I'm seeing at the middle school. Social media is huge once you hit those preteen and teen years. 90% of the student conflicts, bullying, harassment, whatever word we put on it, 90% involve social media in some way. Most of those are Johnny says Steve posted this about him on Snapchat or Instagram. And now that drama comes into the school. It spreads like wildfire. It becomes a show. And then ultimately it gets to the office and we have to sift through all of that. I would say to parents and community members, extended family here tonight or listening, if you can help in some way, it is right here. Please know what your children are doing on social media, have their passwords, know how to navigate it. I can help show you some things. There's tutorials all over online. That would be a great help to all of us because 90%. Now, the most common conflict referrals that come into the office are foul language. Foul, direct, personal attacks, they are 80% of the conflicts we have in this building. And what I am seeing now, more so than any other point in my career, is rapid escalation. Very few things will get physical, but it won't stay in minor verbal area. We've all been in those situations. Shut up. No, you shut up. No, you shut up. Now, it's shut up, followed by a string of profanity. There's no middle ground. So things escalate very quickly, and we see it again and again, and we're doing our best to address all of that. We also have had several reports of physical altercations that are occurring after school hours off of school property. Those are hard to manage because the ramifications come into school, but school doesn't always have the authority to go and enforce upon those. And that's where we need assistance of outside agencies. For example, notifying local police departments if needed. We do see a need amongst our student body in general for empathy building. Understanding what others are thinking and feeling and not just focused on ourselves. Next slide, please. One of the partnerships we built this year that I'm very pleased with is with the Crime Victims Council of the Lehigh Valley. Along with providing advocacy for victims of crimes, the CVC also does proactive education. They reached out to me over the summer, do you want to have a meeting? I said, absolutely, let's talk. And they are looking to branch out and do more bullying and conflict programs with students across the Lehigh Valley. Mrs. Bethany Ebner is our outreach educator. She is fantastic. She is wonderful with middle school kids, really gets them talking. She just does a real good job bringing stuff out of those kids. So it's in-person instruction. What we did in September and October, bullying and also some self-control. November, December, social media and cyberbullying. This month and next month, we're looking at appropriate boundaries and sexual harassment. And then in the spring, we have it open to kind of see where our needs are. This reaches all students in both grades 7 and 8. So it is universal throughout the building. Ms. Ebner has also done education for the faculty and staff at in-service days and at team meetings. And we do a debrief after every session so that she's able to explain to me what she's seeing as someone who is coming into the building as a visitor. I want to share one thing that kind of illustrates the need to have an educational component in how we address these conflicts. I had a student that I'll refer to as Johnny, and I'm not going to reveal anything too personal so as not to identify Johnny's real name, but I want to share something that just hopefully illustrates these points. Johnny was a student who was in my office and Mr. Stroll's office repeatedly for a lot of those lower level conflicts, escalating things with foul language. Every now and then there'd be some shoving and we had to do some consequences. And again, we got to the point where we're spinning our wheels. And Miss Ebner came in and had agreed to speak with Johnny and some others, and Johnny said this: happiness does not exist. It happens just in small moments. Life is about survival. That child is 12 years old. So there's more that needs to be addressed there than solely a punishment. I will say that after that was found, we did put more supports in place. Johnny's doing wonderfully, still has his moments, still drives me bonkers twice a week, but overall, he's really, really improved and doing a nice job. But that informs this conversation. It's not justification for bullying. It's not justification for conflict. It's context that we need to understand. One more slide, please, Mr. Haas. Some upcoming activities and events. If you are available, please come to our coffee and conversation meetings here at the middle school. Our next one is next Tuesday, the 18th at 6:30. This is where we talk about a lot of this in more detail, and I seek input from the community to help me, get this stuff moving. We are also continuing our partnership with the Crime Victims Council. We're already talking about next year. We got some good stuff in the works. I am looking to have a spring incentive activity focused on teamwork, but with a good mix of kids. So we're trying to get a volleyball tournament together at the middle school. We let kids kind of pick their own teams. They pick their own friends. Moving on later in the year, it's going to be like we're going to be forcing them to kind of spread out a little bit and expand their social circle. So I'm looking forward to that. And we are forming a student leadership team to try to evaluate the approaches that we have and get students to have a voice in this. So thank you for the time, and I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Velocity at the high school.
Thank you, sir. Good evening again. Nice to see you all again. Next slide, Mr. Haas. Again, very similar. There's a lot of things that I'm going to be speaking about. I won't repeat as much as my colleagues, Mr. Schneider, Mr. Brenneman, and Mr. Hauser did a really nice job of explaining how we define bullying, and also you heard a lot of mention of SHWEBs, or positive behavior intervention support. So I'm going to be focusing on how that looks at the high school. Next slide, please. Our positive behavior intervention support program highlights the essential skills which Mr. Hauser actually helped me put into place last year through our connection with CFES Brilliant Pathways, and I'll get into CFES a little bit later. But the essential skills, as you had seen the graphic before, it highlights on what people might define as soft skills, okay? But these soft skills have been proven to be the skills that students and adults need to be successful in the future. Leadership, agility, perseverance, networking, teamwork, goal setting. I will be referring to the essential skills through this, through my presentation. Also, we've participated in the school climate survey to take a pulse of what our climate is like, and in order to change a school culture, you need to know what the climate is. So we're actively pursuing that to improve every day. We also have check and connect and check in, check out. Those are tier 2 interventions where students will check in with a staff member or somebody that they trust to just focus on whatever is troubling them in order to be successful. Our Renew program is a very intensive tier 3 intervention that focuses on students' behavior and how they can improve. And each student that is involved in that program has a small team of adults within the building to work with them to improve their behavior. We also have students with IEPs that have case managers, and they have individual behavior plans if they have behavioral needs. Also, sometimes academic needs can lead to some behavioral situations where they get frustrated. Also, we have our Student Assistance Program, aka SAP. And underneath that, you see there's a number of different agencies that we utilize to help support our students through either group sessions or individual counseling sessions. Center for Humanistic Change, Delta Diagnostics. We also recently hired a social worker who's been doing an outstanding job, where I think 10 hours a week for us is not enough. So we'll be working on that to improve that or increase those hours. Also, Mid-Atlantic Rehabilitative Services, that is our partnership with this group to help our students with any chemical dependency needs. Also, we have Mr. Hauser talked about our athletic honor code. This has been instituted through our athletics via our coaches and Mr. Geist. And lastly, our Avidum Club. Our Avidum Club is a not very new club, but one of our newer clubs that was created about 3 years ago to bring awareness to depression and suicide awareness. Next slide, please. Here are our responses to bullying. Now, my colleagues said it a lot more eloquently than me. One of the things I want to highlight in what we do, and I think Mr. Brenneman did highlight this, is that every report that we get, we look into, we investigate. Because the first thing is what we have to do, we have to verify what is happening, what may not be happening, or what more may be happening that was reported to us. So we have to take a look at, I think the saying is that there's always 3 sides to a story. There's side A, side B, and side C that's actually somewhere in the middle there. All right, so we need to look at it thoroughly. And that doesn't just involve administration. Involves our school counselors. Our school counselors have been doing a ton of work this year, working with our students, working through peer mediation, working through conflict resolution. That's one of the things that I've prided myself through my 26 years, anytime that I've worked with students with disabilities or without disabilities, where we had a conflict, it was very important for the alleged victim and the alleged perpetrator to meet to discuss in a safe area so that they can come forward with what they feel and how they interpret it. And very similar to what Mr. Hauser said, each side gets to speak without fear of repercussion, okay? So that's something that we work very closely with our counselors to do. And it's very important to have their counselor there because it's somebody that they work with and that they trust. Not that they don't trust me, but as administration, I'm looked at a little bit differently than their counselor, okay? Or if the student has an IEP, their case manager is involved also. As you can see, there's some other things that we also do that the other principals have also alluded to, so I won't repeat that, but I wanted to highlight the interaction between the counselors, myself, and the students. Next slide, please. Now, what we're seeing is you can see that this was the data from December 15th. Now, between the 15th and now, we've had a lot of breaks. So, and also we had our, I'll allude to it later, our Winter Agility Challenge. So I didn't want to take the information from that because I thought it would be skewed. But as of December 15th, we've seen this. 30% of our referrals, of 197 referrals, were defined to noncompliance. And I will say that some of that could be attributed to inappropriate language also. I'm happy to say that the harassment has not been as high as I had feared. We have had some minor harassment and or bullying reported, and as I said before, we look at both sides. We bring them in for some conflict resolution. This is the harassment that has actually risen to disciplinary consequences on top of that. Okay. Next slide, please. Here are our partnerships. As you can see, they're very similar to what Mr. Hauser, Mr. Schneiderwright, and Mr. Brenneman have said to all of you. One of the things I want to highlight too is that our CLIU staff trauma-informed care and social-emotional learning training, we've contracted with the IU, with Mr. Heater, for every one of our in-services except one. So we think it's really important. It's a district goal. It's a school-wide goal for our teachers to be informed of trauma-informed care and social-emotional learning strategies, practices, to be able to identify those students that are at risk. Case in point, the story that Mr. Hauser just shared with us identified different ACEs, okay? And what are ACEs? They're adverse childhood experiences. These students are experiencing things that we're not aware of, but when they come out like that, it gives a little context as to why or the root cause of that behavior. And that is what we're trying to get down to. What is the root cause? Okay, what is the function of the behavior, but what is the root cause that's motivating it? That's sometimes caused by ACEs that we wouldn't know unless we did that investigation. Our other great partnership is CFES Brilliant Pathways. CFES stands for College Careers for Every Student. That is where we got the essential skills from. Mr. Link invited me to a conference a number of years ago, fell in love with the idea. We have a Mr. Manny Tejeda is our liaison, and he works with us with our students, which we call scholars, to develop our essential skills, to form mentorships in order to be successful in college and careers. And from there, we're taking it to train our scholars to be mentors to our middle school population, and thus building the bridge, a more robust bridge between the middle school and the high school. Now you might say, what does that have to do with bullying? Well, if they're networking, being leaders, being agile, persevering through challenges, and setting goals, they're not going to be harassing one another. They're going to be supporting one another. So through proactive strategies, we don't have to do too many reactive strategies. Next slide, please. Recent and upcoming events. Want to highlight just a couple things here because I know I'm running out of time. I had talked to, I said about our trauma-informed care training. We've also had some positive behavior intervention support assemblies for our students to highlight the essential skills and to introduce our positive referral system, which identifies and rewards students that have earned essential skills training or mastered them. Also, our agility challenge that we had on December 22nd, focusing on being punctual, being on time. Every student that earned this was able to participate in a number of fun activities the day before break. And I want to say it was very successful. We did improve attendance from 1 to 5%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but if I could get one kid to be on time, that made that teacher's day and it made that kid's day. So hopefully, and we will have another one in the spring. Last two things I wanted to point out. I want to give some kudos to Mr. Stroll, our assistant principal. He is spearheading a career and college fair that Mr. Hauser, due to COVID, was not able to do. So we handed the ball off to Mr. Stroll, and that is happening April 22nd. Mr. Stroll, on the spot, how many businesses and colleges do we have currently?
We're about 30.
About 30, okay, that's great, because last month it was only 20, so nice job. Lastly, the Blues program is something that Center for Humanistic Change has brought to my attention, and it's a new program we're looking to institute at the high school next year. It's focused on students to teach students with depressive symptoms or at risk of depression, cognitive restructuring techniques. So more to come with that. I hope to have a more detailed report once we institute that next year. That is it for me. Do you have any questions?
Actually, we're going to have Dr. Stoker.
Sorry, forgot about that.
Dr. Stoker, who is joining us remotely, is going to walk us through the last two slides and share some final thoughts. So, Dr. Stoker, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Link, and thank you to our principals for the very detailed presentation regarding our anti-bullying steps that we're taking across the district. Next slide, please. In conclusion, across the district, we are taking a trauma-informed approach to bullying. For those of you who were able to sit in this evening on our policy committee, we talked about our trauma-informed approach and threat assessment policies being updated. This continues along those same lines. So a trauma-informed approach begins with understanding the physical, social, and emotional impact of trauma on individuals, as well as on the professionals who help them. Recognizing how trauma affects the individuals involved helps us proactively and reactively address incidents of bullying. Some of those approaches include providing trauma awareness training, establishing physically and emotionally safe spaces in our schools, fostering interpersonal connections among students, and also between students and staff. Next slide, please. It includes teaching students how to self-regulate their emotions, collecting baseline and subsequent data to adjust our approach, and engaging parents and guardians and community partners in our work. And you heard a lot of that this evening. At this time, we would like to acknowledge key individuals who work with our students who are in conflict every day. They include administrators, school counselors, school psychologists, a partnership that we have with Knowlton Diagnostic and Treatment Centers, the counselors there, our social workers, our school nurses, teachers, and also our support staff. Every member of our district, every staff member helps in some way, shape, or form. As stated earlier, and we can't stress this enough, parents and guardians and our community partners are an integral part of the work that we do in this area, and we look forward to continuing to cultivate those relationships to support our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stoker. At this time, Mr. Green, I'll turn it over to you to open it up for any questions or comments.
Yeah, we're going to go outside the box a little here, and if anyone in the audience wants to make any comments on the plan, their thoughts, feelings, etc., You're welcome to do so, even if you didn't sign the sheet or whatever. Anyone?
Mr. and Mrs. Farringer?
Just keep it very brief. I had spoken a couple of weeks ago to you folks, and I just want to say thank you to all of you for putting this together. It's much appreciated. I think it was needed. Not hide from it. You guys faced it head on. I appreciate that greatly. Shows a lot of character. Every one of you principals, thank you very much, especially Mr. Reiner. I wanted to say thank you personally. I was trying to when I spoke the last time, but I was a little emotional. Not feeling myself. He's been fantastic throughout every part of the very unpleasant situation. His communication skills phenomenal. His empathy was there for us. Even the hours that the man works. You guys have a tremendous asset there, and I just wanted to say that publicly. Thank you guys again. I do appreciate it, and I can say I like to be positive too. When possible, things have been better. So thank you all. Much appreciated.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this to our attention. Also, say thank you to your son for being the brave individual that he was to participate in the program, to not go off the deep end, to stay as much as he possibly could within the rules. I know if that was me, I don't know what I would have done, you know, and say thank you to him for what he did to help our district also. So thank you. Anyone else? No?
I just have one comment.
Yeah, sure, Bob.
Thank you, principals, for an outstanding presentation, very thorough. I do like to see, you know, the spiraling effect you have, you know, starting with kindergarten all the way up to the high school. Two words that I didn't hear that I'm just going to tell you as an ex-administrator myself for many, many years, diversity and inclusion. And I'm assuming weave through your programs you're directing at least some of those lessons towards those two issues, which obviously are in the forefront for everybody. But other than that, very pleased that what I heard, what I see, and, you know, obviously it's a very difficult thing when you're dealing with bullying issues. And I'll say firsthand, it's very difficult for us as adults to try to control what comes out of students' mouths and their behavior. I wish we had the magic dust that we could, you know, throw it on them and change their behavior, and it's obviously impossible. So a partnership with parents is essential, and I appreciate your efforts and hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else on the board? Any comments? No? Last chance? No? Okay. Back to Mr. Link.
Thank you, Mr. Green. At this point, I'm actually going to transition up to the podium and give a brief review of where we are with our district goals.
Okay.
First, I'm going to grab an extra water bottle.
What do you need?
So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Clearly, we have a packed agenda this evening, but I'm glad to see that we have community partnership and participation. I'd like to give kind of a mid-year review of where we are with our district goals that were approved back in the spring semester. So, I'd like to start by sharing our mission statement. So, Mr. Hawes, next slide, please. Again, that's a mission statement that has been near and dear to Northern Lehigh School District. And I like to think that the presentation that was just given, some of the accolades that we shared out this evening with our student groups, is also reflected in our mission statement there as well. Next slide, Mr. Hawes, please. So I'm not going to read each goal to you, but I'm going to let them linger there for a minute or so, and then we're going to kind of go into the update part of it. So that's our achievement and growth goal for the current school year. So what does that mean? We want to see our students achieve academically, socially, and emotionally, and we want to see them to continue to make growth, right? Because it's one thing to be able to say, I received this grade on an assessment. I scored at this level on a state assessment. But we want to make sure that they're continually making progress, even if they're a high achiever or if they're a student that's more at risk for struggles. Next slide, please. This year, again, we are kind of in a hold pattern, receiving some of the big data that we get from the state, Keystone results, PVOS scores, PSSA results. We reached out as recently, Dr. Stoker contacted them today to see where we were with some, or where we are with some of our PVOS, which is a Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System, to see when we're going to be receiving those results. Their response back to us is, as you are aware, the testing windows have been delayed and extended. We're hopeful that you will receive the results later in the winter of 2022. So we don't have those results as of yet. However, we have some local assessments that we can look at to use as predictors towards the big state assessments. Next slide, please. At Peters Elementary School, there's been a focus on intervention. It's not often that I'm going to say that we need to intervene with our kindergarten students coming in academically, but we do. Because a lot of times those students that may have been participating in a traditional pre-kindergarten type program or receiving support from their moms and dads and guardians in the household, we know things have kind of gone sideways since late 2019, and a lot of those children have not received the traditional supports that they typically would receive even coming into kindergarten. So in some ways, we're already playing catch up with our kindergarten students. So what are we doing? We're adapting the reading intervention schedule to allow us to accommodate more first and second grade students in our intervention groups. This was done to address learning loss. Keep in mind, we have some students that are now second graders that haven't really had yet a traditional school year. Some of them were actually out all of last school year because those families selected to learn virtually. We've done some scheduling changes with the staff that we have available. And I'm going to emphasize that word available because staffing has been an issue in Northern Lehigh School District, especially when it comes to support staff like classroom para-educators, or even their substitute pool to be able to free up some other more permanent staff members to go work directly with students to provide interventions. So Mr. Schneiderwright and his team have worked hard to rearrange those schedules. I'm happy to say that I think we now have all of our power educators in place at Peters Elementary School, and we're deploying them in ways to work directly with the students that need the most assistance. So for example, 2 paraprofessionals who are working with kindergarten students during all instructional times during the day. So there's always 2 paraeducators supporting our kindergarten classrooms, teachers and students at Peters Elementary School. And then certain times throughout the day, specific times throughout the day, there are 3 to 4 paraprofessionals that are ready and able to assist those students. We have data meetings occurred in November and will be reoccurring over the next few months to examine the most current data related to student success. So this is our local data. This is the assessments that happen right in the classrooms that we use to help address student needs, and then ultimately as they rise up through the buildings into Mr. Briner's class, school over here at Slatington Elementary School, that's when they are first going to be exposed to statewide testing. Next slide, thank you, Mr. Hawes. Slatington Elementary School, in the previous presentation we heard the WIN period, or the WIN time. For those of you that may not be familiar with that, that stands for what I need, right? Whatever that student needs is what we're going to focus on during that time. So WIN and core instructional times have been focused on slowing down to address learning gaps that are being identified. So in other words, when we realize that a student, a small group of students, or even particularly, possibly an entire class level, has a common area of need, we're going to slow down and we're going to focus on that, and we're going to put energy into that to helping remove that barrier to learning for those students. Tier 1 and Tier 2, that's a phrase that we heard for behavioral supports. It actually, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 interventions actually started out as behavioral type interventions, and we realized that they worked very well. So the kind of academic side of the house picked up that same language to say, okay, we can implement interventions in the academic way using the same model. So Tier 1 and Tier 2 academic interventions is occurring in reading and math during the WIN period. Students have been homogeneously grouped using STAR benchmark assessments, and interventions are being planned and implemented with different groups in different classes. It's group-specific intervention for kids that need the same type of support. We're not going to put them into an intervention group if they don't need that intervention. Next, by the final STAR reading benchmark in June of 2022, our goal is that the percentage of students in the current 5th grade that are at or above benchmark will meet or exceed the percentages of students at or above benchmark for that cohort when tested in 2020. So in other words, we're tracking cohorts. We want to measure the same group of kids at different times, different snapshots of time through the current year and through upcoming school years to see if those group of that group of kids is making progress as they advance through the curriculum, knowing that the curriculum becomes more difficult each academic year. To accomplish this, an additional 9% of the students will need to be at or above benchmark. We're looking to move to increase our current number by 9%. Next slide, please. Northern Lehigh Middle School, still focusing on achievement and growth. Monthly benchmarking throughout the first 2 marking periods conducted through the STAR to inform instruction, particularly in reading and literacy. Focus points are reviewed with teachers at each faculty meeting. We have already seen a reduction in the number of literacy skills indicated as being below a middle school level. Already, just through that intervention right there, really having teachers focus in on the data that we have in our hands, we're seeing a reduction in students that are not at a middle school level for literacy type skill sets. The flex period has become more focused on targeting academic improvement. So we had some time in the schedule at the middle school. That time is now dedicated towards academic improvement. Using the IXL platform, that's another one of our software databases that we use to assess kids and kind of warehouse data. Weekly flex lessons in both English, language arts, and mathematics are assigned to students for remediation or enrichment. An important part of this is we know that we have students that may be delayed, but we can't forget about the students that are on level or achieving at a higher level than is anticipated. We want to continue to stretch those students as well. Mr. Hauser and his team are doing an excellent job with that. Similarly, we have implemented a band-focused flex period once per week to allow for more band enrichment and to foster growth in music education. Listen, we got a lot going on with our academics, but a commitment that the group of administrators made to our school board kind of going into the pandemic was that we need to build up our number of students that want to be actively engaged in music education, build up our band numbers again, build up our color guard numbers again. Our band does amazing things with the small numbers that they have. We brought Mr. Carroll from the high school down to the middle school to work closely with Mr. Yonkman to kind of refill that pipeline as they go up into the high school. Finally, for the middle school, administration has begun an assessment audit. So in other words, we look at the assessments we use to say, are they assessing what we want them to be assessing? Presently looking at teacher grades for standards and anchors, alignment, frequency of standards, anchors, instruction, and common assessment. So how we kind of like to phrase this is does the written curriculum align to the taught curriculum, align to the assessed curriculum? There should be a thread that goes through all of that. Otherwise, we're missing the mark. We're not assessing what we're teaching, and we're not teaching what's actually in the curriculum. That's part of a curriculum, or rather an assessment and curriculum audit. Thank you, Mr. Hawes. Northern Lehigh High School. The high school was identified back in the 1920 school year as being in need of targeted support and improvement. That's called a TIS plan, or a TIS designation, for the 1920 school year. This is specific to students that are either economically disadvantaged or have special needs. They have an individualized education plan. However, when the pandemic came, here's another one of those times where they hit pause on receiving our data, but also turning our data around to kind of reevaluate as what we are doing as a public school district and giving us feedback. That has not occurred. So we were like, okay, well, where do we go with this? We know that we need to improve on this. Feedback from the state was, if you had that designation then, you still have that designation, even if you can show evidence that you are out of that designation category. Doesn't necessarily make sense, but okay. I'm happy to report that already through Mr. Vlasi and his team, they were able to reduce the number of students, basically that were not heading to meet graduation requirements, specific to that category of students, because that's something that we're specifically measured on. And so not only has the number of students in those categories not heading towards graduation reduced, we're actually increasing the ones that are heading towards graduation. And our goal is to be greater than or equal to the state average of 91%. And they're starting the process over again. We now almost have finished the first semester at the high school, the first term. So we're able to start using that data to identify new groups of students that are on the verge of falling into this designation category that we don't want to be in, or are still currently in it that we need to move out of. Next slide, please. Okay, district-wide for achievement and growth. Through our Esser 3B funds, which Dr. Stoker kind of walked us through at the beginning of the meeting, we are initiating after-school programs in each of the schools to address the academic needs of students. That will be happening before this month ends, actually. These programs will have a different focus in each building: literacy, tutoring, homework help, etc. Principals are currently gauging interest of their staff for leading these sessions and student interest for participating. We hope to kick off our after-school programs at the end of January, beginning of February. We have allocated funds to run these programs for multiple years as permitted within the grant funding that we have received. Again, an emphasis on student achievement and growth. Thank you, Mr. Hawes. Okay, we're going to transition. So for achievement and growth, we kind of broke it down by building and then district-wide. The next goal area is it's going to be more of a global view. It's not going to be broken down by building. It's going to be more of a district-wide approach. So professional development goal, let that hang there for a short bit. Okay. We know that if we want our students to succeed, we have to provide the training, the professional development, tools and resources to our teachers to help our students be able to succeed. Next slide, please. So district-wide, for this current school year, professional development across the district has focused on our federal and state mandates. There's certain must-dos. Our district building initiatives, a lot of what you've heard about in the previous slides, focusing on achievement and growth. Supporting staff with educational tools and instructional practices through the pandemic, engaging students in academics through differentiation of instruction and updating our curriculum. We are going through a massive curriculum overhaul right now, K to 12. How many?
Documents running right now?
Yeah.
240 some odd.
240 plus different curriculum document revisions are going on right now under the leadership of Mr. Pine with the support of our curriculum council and teachers in every building. The majority of our in-house professional development has occurred on in-service days. So far we've had 6 of them, another one coming up on Monday. We have 10 in the calendar total. We've utilized administrative retreat for our own professional development as administrators. That took place in the summer. New teacher induction days, faculty meetings, small group or one-on-one sessions, synchronous and asynchronous type modules for our faculty. Professional development has been facilitated by district and building administrators, school psychologists, our school police officers, our school nurses, teacher leaders, our technology integration specialists, as well as external supports, such as our opening speaker, Jonathan Mooney, focusing on climate and culture. The Institute for Teaching and Leading, that's I4TL. Imagine Learning and Read 180 are curriculum packages that we use. Part of that partnership with them is they send trainers to work with our administrative team and professional support staff. PASS is one of the surveys that we've recently our students took to give us feedback again on culture and climate in the buildings, and Center for Humanistic Change. And of course, there's certain things that we have to be aware of legally so that we stay in compliance with what we're doing. And we often look to our law firm, King Spry, represented this evening by Attorney Roddick, for those type of professional development sessions. Next slide, please. Okay, culture and climate. Speaking a lot about this tonight, right? We know that people are stressed right now. People are stressed. Students, our employees, our community members, because of everything that's going on in the world. And we need to be able to say that we want to support them through all this so they can continue to function at a high level. Just let that hang there for a second. Okay, Mr. Hawes. All right, district-wide, we had, let's see, one of our CPIs, Crisis Prevention Intervention, instructors was recertified. Those are our school psychologists in nonviolent crisis intervention with a focus on trauma-informed care. A lot of this is going to sound familiar from the anti-bullying presentation. Through our train-the-trainer model, at this point in the school year, all paraprofessionals and the crisis team at Peters Elementary School have been recertified. So instead of trying to send everybody out to large training sessions, we've had 2 people in the district become certified trainers so they can train our people in-house. We have added, and again, Mr. Marks, Gene Marks, our school psychologist over here, is one of those certified trainers. His counterpart, Sydney Snyder, our other school psychologist, is the other in-house certified trainer. Character Strong to our middle school emotional support classroom to address social emotional learning for students with special needs. Our threat assessment team, this is required by the state now, however, it's something that we want to do anyway. At this point, every building in the district has a threat assessment team to review, discuss, and follow up on any threats. We've also had a draft threat assessment policy. Dr. Stoker shared that out earlier this evening at the policy committee. And we're looking to have final approval on that in February. And finally, Northern Lehigh Middle School has built a new and strong partnership with Crime Victims Council. We have our, again, this is repetitive from the previous presentation. It's good to know that we're consistent. Huh? A representative, our coffee and conversations are going on at the secondary level, and parent engagement meetings continue to go on at the elementary level. So K to 12, we have some sort of community outreach going on to give parent community member voice in our buildings. Next slide, please. Again, more on culture and climate. We talked about adverse childhood experiences. All of our staff have, that training actually began right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's moving forward. That's how can we recognize not only what our students, but even actually our employees, what trauma they may have experienced, and how does that manifest in the classroom or the workplace, and what can we do to support them. We work closely with some of our partnerships. There are actually the United Way and actually Lehigh University. And again, that's an initiative that Mr. Pine is leading in the district. Mr. Velasquez has already mentioned that Northern Lehigh High School is working directly with consultants from the CLIU to provide trauma-informed care, social emotional learning training, and self-care training. And that has been well received at the high school. And ongoing parent engagement meetings at the elementary level and coffee and combos at the secondary level. I see a typo there, I'll have to fix that before it goes up on the website. All right, instructional technology goals. That's the goal statement. So, you know, since March of 2019, instructional technology has taken on not only a new meaning, but is needed at a level that we've never seen before in typical K-12 type setting. Again, I have acknowledged our school board for this before. We were in a place going into the pandemic that some school districts were not, only because the amount of technology that we had readily available, not only for our employees, but for our students, and to be able to push that out into the home setting fairly quickly. Yes, we had some learning to do, and yes, we had to kind of figure some things out as we went, but we were in a place where we could say, okay, we're gonna switch to virtual learning quickly, and that's because of instructional technology that we had available at that time in the district, and it's only grown since then. Next slide, please. So this year, as we continue to either add to or upgrade our technology, this year we targeted at Peters Elementary School and Slatington Elementary School. Every student was given a new Chromebook. Installed 16 new interactive projectors in the high school classroom, and these are projectors where not only are they interactive, like, you know, it's kind of like a touchscreen type of thing, but also they have the capacity or the capability to wirelessly project, right? So the teacher or student doesn't have to be tethered to the projector. We have that in our boardrooms and in our libraries, and we're looking to push that out into the classrooms so the students themselves can actually lead instruction and not actually have to physically connect to the projectors, but they can just share their screen up for all students to see. They've worked, the technology department has worked with our assistant superintendent and the director of instructional technology, curriculum, and instruction on the implementation of Ed Insight and Bright Bites. This is data collection type of tools, data analysis, data warehousing, where we can use all of that to better inform our decisions as they relate to curriculum. Ultimately, our technology department, this evening we have Mr. Hill with us and Mr. Hawes. We also have two technology support people, Mrs. Miklos and Mr. Kramer. They're kind of like our special forces of technology, all right? When somebody needs something in the classroom or in one of the buildings or up at the administration building, we put in a work ticket, and Mr. Hill's team responds usually within the hours, and we have somebody deployed to that site to try to fix it. However, if we know that we have something that we're going to need it ahead of time, like even like something like this tonight, this does not just all happen. We have the whole command center over there. They get there early, they set everything up, and they stay late to break it all down. And this is the first time we're doing these type of presentations in this auditorium this evening, and so far I'm very happy with how they're going. So I hope that we can continue doing it this way. Next slide, please. District operations goal. So this has to do with the actual kind of physical plant of the district. How do we ensure a safe, healthy, and secure learning environment in a cost-efficient manner? Next slide, please. Here are some things that we've achieved either at the very end of last school year or during this school year, which we're approximately halfway through. We are at the beginning stages of a new Northern Lehigh Middle School kitchen renovation and upgrade funded through Essers. I'm happy to say that the equipment has been ordered, it's being manufactured. Right now, all indicators are it will be on site here for the first day after school ends. Reorganization of our business and HR office and food services offices due to mid-year retirements, resulting in a reduction in personnel costs while ensuring continuity of services. Through that restructuring, we were able to decrease some costs, but also have enough staffing available where the work continues and we're ready to do it. Beginning of this year, although delayed, we are very happy that we had the new playground installed at Peters Elementary School, resulting in a safer play area, which also meets industry standards for accessibility.
So happy.
He's so happy. He's as happy as the children. We secured a new 5-year contract with Brandywine Transportation, so we're set to go with that. I'm happy to report that, I probably shouldn't even say this out loud, but I'm happy to report that we've been very fortunate with our drivers and bus drivers, van drivers, and the aides. I think we had to cancel one morning run this school year so far. And we talk to the terminal manager almost every night, every Sunday afternoon. Okay, how are we doing? How's staffing looking? They actually have some drivers in the pipeline, so we can actually have 1 or 2 substitutes. So we're happy with our relationship with Brandywine Transportation. Installation of new 4G safe transport GPS devices on school buses and vans. Some of you may have heard about or read about on the airlines are fighting with the FCC, FCC, thank you, because 2G is going away, right? So if you have a 2G phone, it's a paperweight. We're going to 4G, we're going to 5G. And that has really kind of screwed up all the air flight control towers. Well, guess what? That also impacted us here on a local level because all of our GPS devices on those buses were 2G. So we had to get ahead of that, and I'm happy to report over winter break, Mr. Durr, I believe, those vehicles were all upgraded to the 4G Safe Transport GPS models, so we're actually a little bit ahead of the curve there. Also, installation of upgraded docking stations for bus camera hard drives and updated associated computer software. So, one of the concerns that was brought up pre-winter break was, are the cameras working on the buses? So the answer to that was yes, the cameras were working on the buses. The problem was, the disconnect, was that our docking stations, which the principals used to load the camera hard drive onto, were outdated. Also, the software was outdated. So that is, they all have new docking stations now, and we're working through the software updates to make sure that the principal software on the computers will run flawlessly with those new docking stations and any hard drives that we pull. So that was about district operations, and I believe, next slide, please. Okay, so that was a quick mid-year walkthrough, a review of the work that we're doing to achieve our district goals. Mr. Green, I'll turn it over to you for any, however you would like to manage conversation, questions.
Anyone on the board have any questions, comments at this point? No? I think we're happy at this point, so thank you for your presentation. We appreciate it. And I would just report to the board members that I have here a packet, and we're going to do a mid-year evaluation this year. Try and get it to me as soon as you can. With the way our meetings have been goofed up lately, I'm not sure we're going to have time to work it in, but we'll try and get to it as soon as possible. And so make sure you get yours from me before you leave. It's evaluation, an envelope, etc. Okay? You want to go into the next one right away?
Honestly, real quickly, I would like to thank the administrative team for all the work that they're putting in towards those goals. It doesn't happen in isolation. It doesn't happen in silos. So thank you, all of you.
Are you going to do the health plan from there, or are you doing that?
You know what? I can do the health plan right from here. Mr. Hawes, can you share the website health plan? And so part of the requirements for school districts now is that every 6 months we have to do a review, a public review of the health and safety plan, anything that has changed since it was previously approved. We made some changes right before winter break, and then we made some changes right after winter break. And that's been the bulk of the changes going back to really August. Or I'm sorry, rather July 13th. So the most recent changes occurred on our first day back from winter break, which is January 3rd. Those are the last revisions. That was an internal review. Tomorrow on the website, the date of last review will be switched to January 11th. If you scroll down to section E, and a lot of this is kind of coming rapid fire. Even most recently today, I received another update from the Department of Health, which we'll have to review administratively going into further into this week. So when we began, we had the very stringent kind of quarantining and isolation policies. Before winter break, we switched that to quarantining if you're a close contact, if you were symptomatic, with some caveats to that. Guidance changed. no forewarning from the CDC near the end of winter break. We kind of reviewed that. We spent a lot of time administratively that Sunday, I guess it was the last Sunday of winter break, communicating with each other. I'd like to give a public acknowledgement to our school nursing team, in particular, nurse Missy DeSocio at the high school and nurse Tracy Hoffman at Slatington Elementary School. Those are our 2 certified school nurses in the district. They gave up, their time on that Sunday of last week, kind of reviewing different iterations that we went through. What we have here, in particular in the contact tracing, isolation, and quarantine section, is that it's kind of a hybrid of what we were doing before winter break, the guidance released by the CDC and our Pennsylvania Department of Health during winter break, resulting in what you see here in front of you now. Most significantly, the quarantine time, the isolation time for people that test positive is now 5 days. Day 0 remains the day that they first had symptoms, or if they're asymptomatic, the date that they were tested. They can end isolation when they are fever-free without the aid of fever-reducing medicine, and their other symptoms are decreasing. We strongly encourage the student or employee to wear a mask for 5 consecutive days after ending isolation. CDC language, PA Department of Health language is must. Collectively, we decided to go with strongly encourage, because that was a decision that the school district made even prior to these revisions when we went mask optional. Student employee close contacts. So we still have to identify who close contacts are. That's a state requirement. We still post those numbers on our district website at the end of each day. And every Friday, I have to submit a report to the Department of Education on the number of close contacts and the number of people that actually tested positive that were in our buildings. Of course, we still notify them if they're students. We still notify their parents. However, we changed that a little bit as well. It's not necessarily a phone call from the nurse to the parent. What we realize now is we can use our community outreach system to connect just to the families that needed to be connected and let them know if their son or daughter is a close contact or not, and that it's recommended that they quarantine for the required amount of time, but if they're symptomatic, they must quarantine. Okay, Mr. Hawes, if you can slide down a little bit there. Let's see. Again, I already talked about this. I still have to report it each Friday afternoon to the state, and at the end of each day, we update it on the district website on COVID tracker. Close contacts in particular, this is a significant change. Whether they have been vaccinated or not, if they had COVID-19 in the last 90 days or not, will only have to quarantine if they are showing symptoms. However, parents or guardians can choose to quarantine them if they're not showing symptoms. Number 5 there, all household members of positive cases must quarantine whether they have symptoms or not. Our data shows that if you live with somebody that tests positive, you're going to get it. That's what our data shows us. Hold on. So slide down a little bit. Right there. Household close contacts are encouraged to get tested on the 5th day of quarantine. Rapid tests, home tests are acceptable. And if the result is positive, they should isolate for 5 days. Both the positive person and the close contact are strongly encouraged to wear a mask for 5 consecutive days after ending isolation or quarantine. So those are the changes, the significant changes that we're going to share in a review this evening. And we're looking to post this up on our website again tomorrow with a new date for review. So I'll open it up to the board for questions, comments, or Mr. Green, however you would like to handle it.
Yeah, look around. Questions, comments, anyone? Guys okay? All right? Yep. Going this way? You okay? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lake.
Do you want to open it up to the community at all?
Any comments?
I'd like to bring up the at-home, person at home who tests positive, and how you're saying that, or even everyone in the household will most likely test positive. That actually isn't true. There's 5 people living in my house and only 3 people ever
looking at district-wide data.
I know,
can't
I
speak to
just
your
think it's
individual.
unfair to the kids that are in that household. Like, I might have a college student who's quarantined to her bedroom the whole entire time, yet my two kids would have to stay home for 5 days.
Yes, that's
And
accurate.
it's not fair to them. They're missing too much school. They're struggling.
So again, our data is a district-wide data. I can't speak to individual households. I would encourage you, though, to reach out to those, if you have not done so already, I suspect you probably have, to the building principals to see what we can do to support them more directly while they're quarantined. I am happy that the quarantine time has been reduced, cut in half.
I think a doctor should be able to make the call to say that if a child has symptoms, then they should stay home. If they have no symptoms, they should be going to school up until the point that they develop symptoms. Once they develop symptoms, then they should stay home and do their quarantine.
I respectfully disagree, but thank you. Mr. King?
I'm gonna have to kind of agree with Natalie on that one. Over Christmas, we had COVID in the house, slept right next to my wife without a care in the world, couldn't catch it if I tried. And believe me, at this point, I mean, I'm trying. The hospitals are allowing staff members to go back that are actually testing positive because they're vaccinated. But yet we're telling people in your household, you may or may not actually have COVID, so you need to lose educational time. So I know it's guidance. I know you guys are doing what you're told to do on this, but you can't say it hasn't happened in the community because, believe me, I'm trying to get COVID at this point and it hasn't happened.
All I'm going to respond to that is I'm working off the data that we have in the district, the trends that we're seeing for household spread. I can't speak to community or individual household members. Mr. Green?
Anyone else? Have any comments? Thank you for your comments, appreciate it. Gee, we're almost done with your report. You're gonna remind them? I'll remind them while you're sitting down. Sure. You have in front of you an ethics form. That has to be filled out by, is it June 1st, June 30th? I'm not sure.
Actually, it's not until like May.
May,
May
okay.
1st.
May 1st, okay. See, that's why I didn't do it, so. So, do your ethics form, send it in. Anything else, sir?
That is it. The ethics form is also required for administrators and Attorney Roddick. Thank you. And that concludes my report this evening. Mr. Green?
Thank you. An executive session was held at 6 o'clock tonight for personnel issues. That was personnel issues in the library. Okay, speaking of personnel, we have personnel items A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Is there a motion to approve the items under personnel?
So moved.
Mr. Keegan, second.
Second.
Mr. Kern, any discussion or questions on the personnel items? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And so ordered. That would take us to policy, and we're looking at approving the 5 policies that were discussed at the committee meeting this night. I guess, 2 of them are new, the rest are first readings? Yeah, okay. Is a motion to approve the board policies?
So moved.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Policy has been moved and seconded. That was Mr. Fedorcia. You got it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any discussion or questions on the policy? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And so ordered. Under conferences, we have 1, 2, 3 conferences. Is there a motion to approve the conferences?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Kern. Any questions on the conference? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And so ordered. Nothing under curriculum instruction. Anyone have any old business? Anywhere? No? Okay. New business, and I'm not going to read this. I'm sorry, not going to read item A. Under new business, you have items A, B, and C. I would note under item B that there were 5 additional days put into that contract for administrators. Is that correct? That was not in the copy of the contract that we received earlier this evening.
So
Okay?
it's a total of 25 vacation days.
Well, 25 vacation days, yeah. Okay, is there a motion to approve new business?
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion on the new business items? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And so ordered. We have financial items A, B, C, D, E, and F. Is there a motion to approve the financial items?
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second? Discussion or questions? I have one question, and if it's there and I don't have to read the whole thing, Sherry, what is the percentage increase that we're allowed this year under the,
Sure, it's under the fourth
Under-
whereas, and it's 4.6% is our adjustment.
there it is, thank you. I thought it was, but I just didn't see it. 4.6%, yes. If there are no other questions, all those in favor of approving the items under financial, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no, and so ordered. I have nothing under legal and correspondence. We have the L-Tri-C Community College Board of Trustees meeting. Any guests? We've had 3 shots tonight. Anybody else or anything else they want to bring up anywhere? No, and I assume no
There
one
was,
called in?
Nobody called, nobody emailed in. Mr. King, you had a check mark under non-agenda items?
It was covered under your updates.
You
Thank you.
okay? And that was the only person who signed up, Mr. King?
The only one that signed up to speak.
Okay, so we're done with that. Then we're down to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Here.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And we're done here.
Well done.